A teenage girl disappeared without a trace in 1989, but her mother's relentless searching unearthed a 30-year-old buried secret. This is the Alexis Miranda Badger story. Well, Amy, today's case is one that I watched an incredible documentary about.
Netflix?
It was Netflix, and it was titled Into the Fire, The Lost Daughter. And I'm going to reference this documentary as we go. I'll put it in the sources later on. You know, I watch a lot of documentaries, and some are better than others. This one, for me, was one of the best I've seen in a very long time.
And I know we called it out on our last recording because sometimes we double up on our recording days. But yes, we are well aware that we're dressed the same, and no, it was not planned.
That's right.
But it's still funny, apparently.
That is funny. Yeah, we're still dressed in pink.
We never wear pink ever.
Nope.
Either one of us.
Nope. I rarely ever put pink on. And when I saw you walk in today, I just started laughing so hard. Okay, so back to the case. This story, I recommend the documentary. Somebody actually just wrote in recently asking if we could put a list of our recommended documentaries up. Or she asked if I could send it to her. And I said, listen, I'm going to make this list and I'm going to put it on our website. And I've given myself this project to have it done by June or like sometime in June. So I will be adding this one and any others that we've referenced or really feel strongly about. So today's story is one about a disappearance, deception, and delayed justice. It will bring up discussions about systemic failures and what justice means to certain people. I also want to say I reached out to Kathy, who is the woman who is featured in the documentary, because I found her so compelling and I wanted to have her on the show. She said she'd pass along my information to her publicist, but I didn't hear back, sadly. So I'm just letting you know, I would have loved to interview her, though I think if you see the documentary, she really answers most questions you and I would have. But she's such a force to be reckoned with. And her tenacity is something I identified with for sure. So today I'm happy to cover this case. I hope you and the listeners enjoy learning about it. Born Alexis Miranda Badger in 1974, her mother, Kathy Tarkanian, placed her for adoption at just 9 months old. And while her name was changed to Aundria after her adoption, I'm calling her by her given name Alexis in this episode for reasons that will become clear later. Kathy Tarkanian was only 16 years old when she left home and married Alexis's father. However, their relationship crumbled after Alexis's birth, and the teenage Kathy felt that she had no choice but to return home, where a sick mother and many siblings who also needed care were waiting for her. So feeling pressure from her family and being so young and on her own, Kathy believed Alexis would have a better life with an adopted family. So Alexis became the adopted daughter of a couple named Dennis and Brenda Bowman. The pair were high school sweethearts who married in 1971 and ended up settling in Norfolk, Virginia, where Dennis was stationed with the Navy. While they wanted a family, Brenda had some fertility issues and was unlikely to have biological children. So they were beyond thrilled when their adoption agency called to say that 9-month-old Alexis needed a home. The Bowmans immediately said yes, opting for a closed adoption, which meant that they didn't know who Kathy was or what Alexis's background was. It didn't matter to them. They were just so happy to have Alexis. And not long after the adoption, the new family moved to the small, religiously conservative town of Hamilton, Michigan. Now in Hamilton, Dennis and Brenda became Sunday school teachers and were very involved in the church, as many families in their community were. Dennis also left the Navy after the move and began a new job in manufacturing and machine maintenance, while Brenda was a stay-at-home mom to Alexis. And 13 years later, they had a huge surprise. Brenda got pregnant. In 1988, Alexis got a new baby sister named Vanessa.
You hear about that often, right? Where people have fertility issues and then get pregnant without planning to.
Definitely. I feel like I've heard about it at times, too, when there's just no more pressure or stress of it all.
Yeah.
So it was, and Alexis was 13, so they were really surprised. However, Though things looked like a happy family on the outside, not everything was what it seemed on the inside. In 1980, when Alexis was just 6 years old, Dennis was arrested for threatening to kill an 18-year-old teenage girl from their neighborhood.
Do we know the circumstances surrounding this? Or what led to it?
Yeah, and it's not good, Amy. The girl had been riding her bike, and Dennis came up behind her in his truck with a gun, yelling at the girl to get off of her bike and go into the woods. He fired a warning shot at her, but the girl was able to escape when a passerby came to her rescue.
Wow. Okay, so he was planning on harming this girl. I didn't know if it was just like threatening her to get off this property or if this is even worse than I thought.
No, this is bad. This is definitely bad. And this girl reported the incident to the police, and Dennis was arrested quickly, and he was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison for this crime. It was terrible for Brenda and Alexis, but Brenda remained committed to Dennis, forgiving her husband for his crime.
I'm assuming he told her that there was something else going on.
You know, I was wondering the same thing, so I looked. She knew the elements of what happened, what his intentions were. I'm sure he did not fess up to that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Dennis served 5 years in prison and was released when Alexis was 11 years old. But the family's issues didn't stop there. And you have to remember now, he was absent from the home for 5 years.
And 5 very important years.
Yes. According to one of Alexis's childhood friends, when Alexis was around 12 years old, she confided that her father was abusing her and that she was very afraid of him. At the urging of her friend, Alexis reported this to a school official. Her school contacted and interviewed the family, which outraged Dennis and Brenda. Brenda couldn't believe that Alexis would accuse her husband of such behavior, and she felt that she was taking advantage of the crime that he was sentenced for and, using that to her advantage.
It's so sad when a mother doesn't believe a child.
Right? Yeah. Brenda, in fact, told Alexis to stop lying, and after taking her to an intervention at their church, Alexis recanted her allegations, and they went to family counseling. As I understand it, CPS also interviewed them but couldn't find anything to substantiate it once Alexis recanted as well. But this certainly would not stop what happened next. On March 11th, 1989, Dennis came home with his infant daughter, Vanessa. She was about 15 months at the time, and claimed that Alexis wasn't home, as she should have been. According to Dennis, the couple's bedroom, which was usually locked, I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's because they had issues with Alexis at the time or if there was something else going on. Anyway, the lock had been broken into and $100, about $100 to $150 cash was missing from their tax rebate money. Also missing was Alexis's purple jacket and one of the Bowman's small bags, like a small suitcase. The couple called the police to report Alexis missing. And though the police filed the report, they really felt that the evidence simply pointed to a runaway teenager.
But she's still a child.
She is, yes. I mean, they filed a missing persons report, but they really didn't investigate it. But there were reported sightings of Alexis in various towns over the next days and months. People really felt that they saw her at different places.
But we also have seen cases where people think they see people and it's not.
Absolutely. And
I'm assuming there was no surveillance. It was just eyewitness accounts.
Yeah, unfortunately. And even though there were all these sightings of Alexis, she never came home and no one ever knew what became of her. And that's where the story might have ended had it not been for a letter that Alexis's adoption agency sent to her biological mother in 2010. Now, when Kathy Turkanian received this letter, she was initially excited as she thought this was probably her daughter looking to meet with her. So she thought this was going to be an exciting opportunity. Since giving up Alexis, Kathy had gotten married and become a nurse, and she and her husband lived in Gloucester, Massachusetts. They did not have children of their own. Kathy always hoped that Alexis had a wonderful life with her adopted parents, and she was really looking forward to just making up lost time and meeting her daughter. But what the letter said was both shocking and gut-wrenching. The letter stated that Alexis had gone missing 21 years ago in 1989 at just 14 years old. And the reason for the letter was that the agency wanted a sample of Kathy's DNA to see if a recently discovered body of a teenage female might have been Alexis.
Okay, now I was going to ask, is that commonplace that they would reach out? Because if it's a closed adoption, usually that wouldn't. But obviously they had to get court permission to do this.
Exactly.
Okay.
And a horrified Kathy responded immediately and wanted to know who were Alexis's adoptive parents and how she could she get more information about her daughter, of course.
She probably couldn't.
No, it was a closed adoption, so the agency wouldn't provide information. However, by 2010, the internet was alive and well. Kathy and her husband did a search for missing kids around Alexis' age at the time because they had the date of, when she was missing, her date of birth. And guess what? It did not take them long at all to find a picture of Alexis on the missing persons list in Michigan. Though Kathy said she didn't recognize her face initially as she'd last seen her as a baby, Alexis's eyes told her that it was her daughter. And you can see this in the documentary. I could see it for sure. So Kathy sprang into action. She began a Find Aundria Bowman Facebook page because that was her name for her adoptive parents. And the floodgates opened. Alexis's friends sent Kathy messages reporting a strained relationship between Alexis and her father and reports of abuse.
So her adoptive family never did any sort of search. I guess the internet wasn't around then, so this was obviously many years after the fact.
It appeared that Dennis did not do much searching. And while I think Brenda didn't do, I don't know how much searching. She did call the police and check in. So I'm not sure, she definitely did some searching. I just don't know how much and to what extent. And yes, the internet wasn't around then, so it would have been different. Some of these stories Kathy was getting disturbed her. One young woman told a story about how she'd gone to the Bowmans for dinner one night, and Alexis had to eat a condiment sandwich for dinner while her parents ate burgers. And when she told her friend that that was all she was allowed to eat that night, Dennis jumped up and hit her so hard she almost fell off the chair, while Brenda sat and did nothing about it.
Was he abusive to his other child as well?
No, not that we know of. I did not find any reports of that. Another young woman reported that Alexis had once stayed at her home for 4 days because she was so afraid of her father. And that was as a young teenager.
This must have been so hard for Kathy because I could imagine the guilt as a mother. It's not her fault. She should have no reason to feel guilty.
But of course you're going to.
You're going to. Oh,
yeah, so this was heartbreaking. Kathy also heard from several of Alexis's friends that Dennis had sexually abused her, according to Alexis. So there were plenty of reports from people who Alexis confided in and who actually saw him physically abusing her.
And I know that one friend told someone, but everyone else kind of kept quiet?
Yeah, so that's something we should talk about at the end. But yeah, it was like the one friend urged her to tell the school, and she did tell the school. And then the school kind of dismissed the allegations. CPS dismissed it.
It's a different time.
Was pretty dismissive of this, saying that, Alexis was troubled. She was getting in a little bit of trouble at school at the time, not major trouble, but a little bit. Her grades weren't great. And so they were chalking it up to her being a rebellious teenager at the time and trying to get her parents in trouble.
I feel like that's one area we could say the tides have changed a little bit, that people take these kind of allegations much more serious.
Yep. You read my mind on that one. Now, at this point, Kathy felt like she had to do something. And she got some unexpected help from some online sleuths. Carl Koppelman, notably, an accountant by day and a cold case sleuth by night. Carl believed that Alexis might be a match to a deceased young woman whose remains were found in Wisconsin. And though she was not a match, once Carl connected with Kathy, he and a few others played an integral role in chasing down leads and gathering information, not just about Alexis, but about the Bowmans. And the more Kathy learned about Dennis, Amy, the worse it got. In addition to his 5 years in prison for shooting at a teenager, he'd been arrested a second time in 1998 for breaking and entering into a co-worker's home multiple times. This was a young woman who lived alone, and apparently she noticed that she was having break-ins. It scared her. She was missing items, most notably underwear and lingerie. And when she contacted the police with the help of a silent alarm, they caught Bowman, who was then sentenced to a year in jail for his crimes. This woman was terrified, though. I mean, this was multiple break-ins over a period of time. So this information about Dennis was troubling, but there was something else that began to bother Kathy and her team. Dennis and Brenda had moved to a new house shortly after Alexis went missing. It wasn't far from the old home, but Kathy couldn't fathom why they would move so quickly. Think about it this way. If your child goes missing and you're worried about them thinking you can't wait for them to come home, if you move, how will they know where to find you, especially prior to the age of the internet?
Yeah.
So what if she came home? According to Kathy, she visited both homes, the one that the Bowmans lived in before Alexis disappeared and the one after. And she said that she became obsessed with the Bowmans' second home. And in particular, she became obsessed with their backyard.
Why?
Well, there was a cement structure, like a large concrete slab, but she couldn't quite figure out what it was and what it was doing pushed back like far in the backyard. Kathy said that she became convinced that Dennis had murdered Alexis and buried her in the backyard.
Wow, that's a big jump.
It's a big jump.
Yeah.
And the problem was, authorities said it was highly unlikely because the Bowmans had moved after Alexis disappeared. So that was after she was gone. So
they would have had to, they would have had to transfer the body.
So they didn't live there at the time. So authorities felt it was pretty unlikely, but Kathy wouldn't let it go to the point where she contacted the Michigan State Police demanding they search the Bowmans' backyard.
Wow. Can they, will they do that just if someone demands it though?
No, the police investigated, though. They were beginning to investigate, but they couldn't dig up the Bowmans' yard without any probable cause. And the Bowmans continued to assert that they had no idea where Alexis was and that she had run away over 20 years ago. There had been sightings of her, and she had never contacted them again. They didn't change their story at all.
Did they almost make it like they were the victims because their child left them?
Yes. In fact, just so you know, actually, Dennis Bowman, when he filed the report, he reported the money missing, and they filed charges against Alexis. The police filed charges. I don't know if the Bowmans asked to, but there was a warrant out for Alexis. And in this warrant, it says victim, Dennis Bowman, and perpetrator, Aundria Bowman.
Wow.
Can you believe that? Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
But Kathy wasn't convinced. Something was wrong with their story, and learning everything she did about Dennis, she decided to apply some pressure. She posted a gigantic missing persons billboard near the Bowmans' home for everyone to see, as well as distributing missing posters everywhere where the Bowmans lived.
So she was hoping that she would put pressure on them to crack?
Yeah. Put pressure on them, but also pressure on law enforcement to do something about it. Have you ever seen the movie 3 Billboards?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought that was an amazing movie, and it reminded me of this, putting the billboards
Was it based
up.
on a true story?
It's loosely based on a true story. So the star of it, Frances McDormand, her daughter was murdered in that or went missing. And in real life, the story was different. It was about, I believe, a father whose child went missing, and he also posted billboards. So loosely based on a true story or inspired by a true story. She also posted online very direct messages that Dennis had killed her daughter and that she was coming for him, that she left messages on their answering machine at home. So Brenda and Dennis called the police and said Kathy was harassing them.
Also, is that defamation?
They probably could have sued her, is the truth. But I don't believe they did. But they did contact law enforcement. And then Kathy and Brenda actually came face-to-face once at a missing persons conference in 2013. And I'm not sure I know why Kathy went, but I'm not sure if Brenda was there because she knew Kathy was going and wanted to meet face-to-face or because she was simply active in trying to find her daughter. I think there was a specific reason, but regardless, Kathy exploded, demanding that Brenda tell the truth and admit that her violent sexual predator husband had killed Alexis. But Brenda adamantly denied that she or Dennis had harmed Alexis, and for some time, the case went nowhere. But in 2019, it would all blow wide open. In an unrelated investigation, Virginia authorities arrested Dennis Bowman for the 1980 murder of a 25-year-old woman named Kathleen O'Brien Doyle, who had been found raped and stabbed to death in her Norfolk, Virginia home.
Oh, wow.
Right? This was...
Oh, so can I take a guess?
Yeah.
Is this going to be part of a plea deal that they're going to get information on Alexis? No, never mind.
No. I was trying to think ahead.
Okay.
It is connected, so
Okay.
it does tie in later. So Kathleen Doyle, this isn't a name that they had heard before. She had been, and this was 1980. At the time, she'd been newly married to a deployed Navy pilot, and she was an academic, an aspiring writer with talent, such a bright future ahead of her. And while the police investigated the crime, it was her friend who had found her. It was so sad. They had a couple glasses of wine at her house the night before, and I believe she found her the next day. While they investigated her rape and murder, they had not been able to identify her perpetrator for almost 40 years.
And then was it reopened as like part of a cold case unit?
Well, what happened was that in 2019, DNA genetic genealogy narrowed the list of potential murderers. So yeah, I think it was, but they had this new technology. They decided to apply to it. And so they started with a list of 31 potential suspects. And Dennis Bowman was one of them. Now, as authorities examined Dennis's background, they realized that he had an adopted daughter who went missing in 1989, but the case had never been investigated as a potential homicide. In fact, in the documentary, Kathy says it was never investigated at all. Now, though, in a stroke of luck, one of the detectives investigating Kathleen's murder met a detective working Alexis's case at a conference, at a cold case conference. And the two believed that Dennis Bowman was responsible for both crimes and began working together very seriously. In his interrogation for Kathleen's murder, Dennis spoke to the detectives. He revealed to investigators that on a night in 1980, while on leave from his Navy training, he got very drunk at a bar and began roaming a Norfolk neighborhood. And what he said was that he broke into a house with the intentions of stealing, but ran into the young female homeowner. When she screamed, he pushed her down and she grabbed his hand that was holding the knife he'd used to break in, her pulling the knife and accidentally stabbing herself. The fact is, detectives knew this was a lie. Kathleen had been stabbed multiple times, beaten, tied with electrical cord, and sexually assaulted before her murder.
So he's going to say what, she did all that to herself as well?
As he said there was no sexual assault. He absolutely adamantly denied it. Now, even though he's denying all this, he's confessed already to being in her house and to the crime. So he's confessed. They've got him.
And they probably have DNA.
Yes. So while they had him on Kathleen, they wanted another confession from him. They wanted to know what he'd done to Alexis. But to get that information, they'd need help from someone close to Dennis.
I know who. His wife.
Yes. They turned to Brenda.
I'm curious about Brenda because is it possible she's just turning a blind eye or does she actually know things that she's keeping secret? I guess we'll find out.
I'm going to tell you all this right now. Despite being charged with murder, Brenda still loved her husband, and believe it or not, she still stood by Dennis. He would call from jail and they would exchange their affections. I love and miss you. That being said, you could hear Brenda expressing frustration. Why wish you would she would say things like, I wish you would never have gone to that neighborhood. I wish you would never have done this. And he says, I wish I would never have either, honey. I'm sorry I did this. It's really unbelievable. But the two of them were now facing a very real separation, not just by prison, but by state, because Dennis was going to be extradited to Virginia to face his murder trial. And this was devastating to the couple. Vanessa, their other daughter, was in Michigan. And I don't believe they had means. They were also getting older, about 70 at the time. And I know that Brenda just did not feel that she could relocate. So this was something the police felt they could use as leverage. With the prosecutor's blessing, law enforcement offered Dennis the option to serve his time in Michigan. They said, look, you're going to be in prison for the rest of your life. But you can be in Michigan and you can see your daughter and you can see your wife. But the exchange, tell us what happened to Alexis.
I was right then. They are going to use the cases to help each other.
You were absolutely right. I just didn't want to give away, but I was like, I wanted to go like a thumbs up, but we're on video now too, so I can't.
Oh, yes. Gotcha. Okay.
Well, what would Dennis say to this offer? He initially said he couldn't help them, but that would eventually change. So Dennis asked to meet with Brenda, like a special meeting at the jail. Not in a visitation room. This would be arranged privately. And at that meeting, he made a confession to her.
And that meeting was being taped, I'm assuming.
Yes. I believe the authorities and Dennis knew that they were going to be watching.
Yeah.
This was arranged. The confession he made, he told Brenda that Alexis was deceased and had been since the day she vanished. According to Dennis, on that fateful day in 1989, he'd come home with their sleeping baby, just as he had said. And Alexis was home and coming out of the upstairs bedroom, just as he said. But he said at this point the two argued, and Alexis threatened to report Dennis for sexual abuse. Dennis says in response, at the top of the staircase, he hit Alexis, and she fell down the stairs, breaking her neck and dying from the fall.
So I have a question. Do we believe that Brenda really didn't know, and he's just trying to save her?
I don't think she knew because a hysterical Brenda seemed still unwilling to believe her husband. She started crying, no, don't admit to something you didn't do for them. Something like that.
Okay.
I think she really, I think somewhere in the back of her mind, don't get me wrong, some in the back of her mind she had to know, but I don't think she actually knew what happened. And there were reports that Brenda would call the police and really, she did follow up on some things. She was looking for her daughter for some time. But Dennis went on to say that he lied about Alexis running away from home because he was afraid to lose his family and go back to prison. But he'd done it. He'd admitted he killed their adopted daughter. But what had he done with her? He claimed that he'd gotten a barrel and had to cut her legs off to fit her in it, and then he placed the barrel by the garbage for collection. He disposed of their daughter like trash and cut her body, mutilated her.
So it wasn't in their backyard the way Kathy had suspected.
Well, law enforcement didn't believe him. They weren't sure, though Brenda stood by his side and made excuses for him again. He'd sent her a letter not long after he made this confession, saying that he lied about putting her out with the trash. In this letter, he said that he'd actually buried Alexis in a grave near a graveyard, wrapped in a sheet, tied with a red ribbon, and sprinkled her grave with cedar chips, cloves, and cinnamon.
What?
Yes, he said that it was peaceful. He felt that Brenda needed to know that she had a proper burial. But at this point, was this version the truth? So they'd have to find the graveyard. It seemed too far-fetched to police. They still didn't believe that they had it right, so they essentially leveraged Brenda again. They went to her and said, only you are going to get Dennis to tell us the truth, and he owes it to you. So essentially, they said, make him. So Brenda, she called, and again, she begged him to stop lying. Please tell me, I can't live like this. I want my daughter's ashes. I want her remains. Dennis, it seemed, finally told the truth. His last confession about where he'd put Alexis was far closer to home than Brenda knew.
Kathy was right.
As Kathy suspected, Dennis had buried Alexis in their backyard. When Brenda had cried out, "We didn't live here, we didn't know this place," Dennis explained that he'd originally buried the barrel with Alexis's body in the backyard of their first house. But when they moved, he dug up the barrel, reburied it at the new house, and then put that cement structure over it, the one that Kathy had become obsessed with.
Why do you think he did that? Took the body with him?
Well, it depends. It's interesting. I think probably just to have it near, because he was probably afraid, what if the new homeowners ever went to got it? Kathy believed it was just another way to control the situation, control Alexis, always have control over it. I think it was more practical. I think he was afraid someone would find her, but it could be both.
Yeah.
With this information, an excavation of the Bowman's backyard was conducted on February 4th, 2020, and police recovered the remains of Alexis Badger. She'd been buried in a trash bag filled with dirty diapers and other garbage. It was anything but dignified. And that wasn't even the end of the story. In his last confession, Dennis Bowman revealed that he had not only murdered twice, but he'd committed many other sexual assaults.
What did he get out of giving these confessions?
I'm not sure. I'm really not. I don't know if at this point when people start confessing, there's obviously a phenomenon too, especially with serial offenders. where they just like the audience. They want time out of jail. Every time Dennis would make a confession and meet with authorities, they would get him. He was particular about liking a coffee, certain snacks and food, so he would get that. And at that point, that's probably all he had. So for a short time after they married, the couple had lived in San Diego. And while there, Dennis said that he sexually assaulted several women. And this was just weeks after he and Brenda married. So now the police were going to work to track down his victims. And they were also hoping that this documentary would help. In the documentary, there was another woman, now a woman, who contacted Kathy. Her name in the documentary is Meta. And she reported being abducted as a child. And while her perpetrator was never caught, she felt fairly certain that Dennis Bowman was him based on the description, the car, the location, everything. So there are a number of other open cases that still can be traced to Dennis Bowman. And by the way, the police also told Brenda about these admissions. So Dennis Bowman pled no contest to the second-degree murder of his daughter, his adopted daughter, Alexis. On February 7th, 2022, he was sentenced to 35 to 50 years in prison to be served in Virginia, not Michigan.
Good.
Ha. Kathy was in the courtroom watching. Dennis is also serving a life sentence in prison for the murder of Kathleen Doyle. So he will die incarcerated.
Are they still in touch?
Yes, they are. I believe they're still married. Brenda had Alexis's remains cremated and gave Kathy half the remains. However, Kathy accepted, but whoa, she was not happy. She was incredibly angry that Brenda would even keep half after everything that happened. She also said, I can't believe it was like mutilating her further, like splitting her up even further. So Kathy is currently fighting to get all of her daughter's remains and to have her name reinstated to her original birth name, which is Alexis Miranda Badger. And that's why I used her name, to honor Kathy's wishes and to honor the work that her mother did in trying to find her.
What an incredible episode. How did you hear about this case?
Michelle.
Yeah, she's good.
She'll often recommend a documentary to me. So she said, I watched this documentary and you have to watch it. It's so good. And it really did blow my mind. It was a two-parter, about an hour each, so 2 hours. I highly recommend it even if you know the story because wait till you see Kathy and what a force she is.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the why this happened and the how this happened. I'm going to start with Dennis Bowman, but I don't want to spend too much time on causes of his crimes. He was clearly a career violent sexual predator who was also a murderer. And Amy, I want to say I wasn't surprised to learn that there were other rapes, but I also wouldn't be surprised to find out that there are other murders.
Really?
Yeah, I suspect that so the first murder was in 1980, and then Alexis's murder isn't until 89. So for those 9 years, those would probably be primary years for his offending. I don't know that he would have necessarily desisted then.
But wouldn't he have wanted the attention and he probably would have confessed to them to get some other gain? Maybe he still will.
It's possible that he still will, yeah. People, again, serial offenders and especially serial murderers tend to roll things out slowly over time. They'll make multiple confessions, but they're always holding something. They always have some piece of leverage. And it's possible still that Dennis thinks that he could get back to Michigan. That he can get certain privileges. There's always something to leverage. So I wouldn't be surprised to find this out. And I mean, I think there's probably many other violent crimes that are attributed to him. He was clearly a career criminal, like no matter which way you look at it. But instead of focusing on his crimes as much, I found myself asking the damn question that annoyed me so much at the end of this, and Kathy as well, as how could the system have failed Alexis at every step? Literally every step. It is one of those cases you asked. She confided in friends. The friends, some of their adult families knew. So I think there was 1 or 2 parents who knew, but knew that she was reporting it to the school. CPS knew, so Child Protective Services, the school, the church, police, every single important institution around Alexis, every single one of them knew about these allegations that she had made about her father multiple times. And let's point out further, one step further, she didn't just make these allegations against any Sunday school teacher. She makes these allegations against a man with a prison record for an attempted rape and murder who served 5 years. How? How did no one think to say, oh yeah, this guy's a serious violent predator, so maybe this girl is taking this seriously.
Yeah, it's infuriating.
I mean, it took the insistence of Kathy and her online sleuthing community to force the investigation forward. While the victims' rights movement began in the 1970s, it didn't pick up real steam until the late 1980s and early 1990s. And as you said earlier, I think Alexis's disappearance would be treated very differently today. But the question still remains. At the end of the day, I cannot understand, why didn't anyone believe this young girl, and why did not one person help her?
Well, that's what led to the ultimate tragedy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
In the end, Kathy Turkanian's relentless pursuit of truth uncovered it. And I think this was a testament to the bond between a mother and child that really can endure beyond all time and all tragedy.
Yeah.
And this story really moved me. I don't know if you could tell, but
yes.
I definitely am so glad that Kathy was able to at least reveal where Alexis was and have part of her remains. And I wish her so much luck in getting her name reinstated.
Mm-hmm. What a powerful story.
Right? And to hear her tell it, too.
I'm going to have to watch the documentary.
Definitely. Don't watch it with your kids.
I was going to say I can't watch it with my kids, but I'll watch it.
Before we go today, too, though, I also want to congratulate Jamie on winning our Women in Crime quiz.
Jamie, we saw her last night at the happy hour.
I know.
Yes. Oh, she's awesome. She's so smart. I'm not surprised that she won.
I know. So we offered this 20-question quiz to our patrons on topics including criminological theories, our favorite, cases we've covered.
And she got 100, right?
She got 100. She got a perfect score.
That's cool. And no one tied, right? No one tied her for 100?
No. She was the clear winner, although people scored very well, I have to say. Anyway, Jamie's got a $100 Amazon gift card on its way.
Cool. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Congratulations. I was excited too. And if anyone else is interested in taking our quizzes, talking true crime with us at happy hours, or joining us for other events, check out Women in Crime on Patreon. Thanks everyone again for listening, and we'll catch you next time on Women in Crime. Women in Crime is written and hosted by Meghan Sachs and Amy Shlosberg. Our producer is James Varga. Script editing is by Abagail Belcastro. Audio editing is by Siler Burr and Jose Alfonso. And music is by Desert Media. If you enjoy the show, please remember to follow and leave a review. You can also support the show through Patreon, where you can get access to additional ad-free content such as exclusive full-length episodes, lectures, a book club, and virtual happy hours with Meghan and Amy. For more information, visit patreon.com/women-and-crime. Sources for today's episode include the documentary Into the Fire, The Lost Daughter, Today.com, People.com, AndTV.com, and the Holland Sentinel.